How do we know what we know? I mean, really think about that. It's a question that sits right at the bottom of, well, everything. And today, we're going to dig into two of the most powerful answers ever cooked up, ideas that didn't just stay in philosophy books. Nope. They completely reshaped science, politics, and how we even think about society. We're going to go from the wiring of our own minds all the way to a grand plan for a perfect world. Okay, let's get into it.
So, first up, a question that just blew up centuries of thinking. For most of history, the default setting was that we're all born with some stuff already installed, fundamental truths about God or math or what's right and wrong. But then a few thinkers came along with a totally radical idea. What if we start with nothing? What if our mind is an empty slate and experience is the chalk? And once you start thinking that way, it leads to an even bigger, bolder question. If we can figure out the rules for how our minds build knowledge, couldn't we use those same rules on society? I mean, could we literally use science to engineer a perfect, stable, prosperous civilization? These two revolutionary questions are what's going to drive our whole story today. Now, to really feel the shockwave these new ideas created, we have to understand the intellectual war they started. This wasn't some minor disagreement. This was a full-blown clash of titans over the ultimate source of all human knowledge. On one side of the ring, you had rationalism. This was the reigning champ for centuries. Rationalists believed true knowledge comes from the inside out. We're born with these innate ideas, and our job is to use pure reason to unlock them. But then, the challenger steps in, empiricism. And the empiricists said, no way. The mind starts as a total blank. There are no preloaded ideas. Everything we know, every single thing, comes from the outside world through our five senses.
And the guy who really became the face of this empiricist revolution was an English philosopher named John Locke. He gave the world this one incredibly powerful metaphor that would just define the whole debate from then on.
He called it the Tabula Rasa. That's just Latin for blank slate. Locke wants you to picture the mind of a newborn baby as a completely empty notepad. No pre-installed operating system, no built-in moral compass, nothing. We all start from the exact same point of zero. And you can see how this was more than just a theory about the mind. It was a huge political statement. It implied that, at birth, we are all fundamentally equal.
Okay, so how does this empty slate get filled up? Locke laid out a two-step process. It all starts with sensation. Our eyes, ears, hands, they're just data collectors, feeding the mind raw information. So you see an apple. Your senses send signals for red, round, hard. Then stage 2 kicks in, reflection. The mind isn't passive. It takes all that raw data and gets to work. It compares that red to other reds, it forms a concept of roundness, and it bundles all these simple bits of info into one complex idea we call apple. So experience provides the ink, but it's our mind that actually writes the words.
So Locke didn't just present his theory, he went on the offensive. And he just started taking apart the whole case for innate ideas. His arguments were super practical. First, he's like, look, there's just no way to prove that everyone is born with the same ideas. Second, he points to kids or people from wildly different cultures and says, hey, these universal moral rules the rationalists love to talk about, lots of people have never even heard of them. And finally, he just looked around the world and saw people disagreeing on pretty much everything. So much for universal truths. The foundation of rationalism was seriously starting to crumble. Okay, let's move on to our next major player, David Hume. Hume basically took Locke's empiricism and just ran with it, right off a cliff. If the only thing we can possibly know for sure is what our senses tell us, Hume asked, then what do we really truly know? His answer would send a shockwave through philosophy. Just think about Hume's famous example with billiard balls. You see one ball rolling across the table, you see it make contact with another one, and then you see that second ball start to roll. But he asks you to look closer. Did you actually see the cause? Did you perceive the force itself that made the second ball move? Or did you just see one event followed by another event? And this is where Hume drops the bombshell. His conclusion? We never actually experience causation. All we ever see is what he called constant conjunction. We've seen one thing follow another thousands of times, so our mind just creates an expectation. It's a habit. We believe the sun's going to rise tomorrow not because we've proven some unbreakable law of physics, but simply because, well, it always has. So those laws of nature we're so sure about, according to Hume, they're just really, really strong habits of the human mind. And this way of thinking led him to his most radical idea of all. If reason can't even prove that A causes B, how can it possibly be in charge of our lives? Hume's answer? It's not. He famously declared that our actions, our morality, our goals, they're all driven by our feelings, by what he called the passions. Reason, he said, is just a tool. It's like a calculator that our emotions use to figure out the best way to get what they want. Reason isn't the captain of the ship. It's the navigator who's just taking orders from the captain's feelings. All right, so from the deepest pits of Hume's doubt, we're going to do a hard pivot to a philosopher who wanted nothing but absolute certainty, Auguste Comte. Comte was living in a time of total chaos, and he saw these empirical ideas not as a path to skepticism, but as the only possible toolkit for rebuilding society from scratch. He wanted to create a literal science of society. To really get Comte, you have to get his era. The guy was born right after the French Revolution, which had just torched the old certainties of monarchy and religion. He grew up watching the insane social chaos of the Industrial Revolution and the endless wars of the Napoleonic period. He saw a world that had lost its anchor, and he was convinced the only thing that could save it was a new authority, the authority of science. His master plan for this was something he called the Law of Three Stages. He believed this was the path of intellectual evolution for all of humanity. First, you have the theological stage. This is where we explain everything by saying the gods did it. Then we graduate to the metaphysical stage, where we swap out gods for abstract concepts, like nature or essences. But the final, and in his view, the best stage, is the positive stage. Here we give up on asking why and focus only on what we can observe, measure, and verify. This is the age of science, or what Comte named positivism. So Comte's dream was a society run by scientific experts, what he called a sociocracy. But as he was fleshing this out, he hit a major snag. Sure, science can give you order, but can it give you a sense of purpose? Can it inspire love and community? His answer to this would be, without a doubt, the weirdest and most talked about part of his entire philosophy. He came to believe that a purely scientific society just didn't have the emotional glue to hold itself together. It needed a moral heart. It needed something to replace the community and shared purpose that old-school religion used to provide. So the father of positivism, the man who said the theological stage was obsolete, decided he needed to invent his own religion. And he called it the religion of humanity. In this new faith, you don't worship a god, you worship humanity itself, with a capital H, the great collective story and potential of our species. He even designed his own sacraments, its own temples, and a calendar full of saints who were just great historical figures like Aristotle, Shakespeare, and Isaac Newton. It was a really bizarre but fascinating attempt to merge cold hard science with human passion. Okay, so as you can probably guess, Comte's religion of humanity didn't exactly become the next big thing. But the core ideas of his positivism, this obsession with observable evidence and the idea that you can study and improve society scientifically, oh man, that stuff had a massive, lasting impact on the world we live in today. I mean, the ripple effects are just huge. Comte's dream of a science of society directly inspired Emile Durkheim, who basically founded modern sociology by treating social trends as facts you could study empirically. In psychology, the whole field of behaviorism, which focuses only on observable actions, not inner thoughts, is pure positivism. And even though Comte wasn't a biologist, his ideas about societies evolving through predictable stages helped create an environment where Darwin's theories about biological evolution could really take root. But maybe the most shocking and, well, visible legacy of Comte's entire philosophy isn't in a textbook. It's something that over 200 million people see every single day, printed right on their own national flag. This was the central motto of Comte's religion of humanity. It turns out that back in the late 19th century, the guys who founded the Republic of Brazil were huge fans of positivism. They were true believers. So they took the core of Comte's motto, shortened it a bit, and stuck it right on their new national flag for the whole world to see. Ordem e progresso. Order and progress. And that really brings us right back to the beginning, doesn't it? We went from Locke's idea that our minds are blank slates, to Hume's shocking claim that reason is just passion's servant, to Comte's wild attempt to build a new world on a fusion of scientific order and religious passion. So it leaves us with one last question to chew on. As we look at our own societies, how much of what we call progress is actually the result of a cold, rational, scientific plan, and how much of it is still being driven by a deeply passionate and maybe even contradictory human vision?